Well guys, happy New Year's Eve. We're in the final day of 2023 and wow, what a year this has been. So of course, this is the last video of 2023. Let's end off the end of the year list with a bit of a disappointing note, but honestly, I just want to say 2023 has been a pretty interesting year for movies. There's a lot of good movies, there are a lot of bad movies, there are some surprises, but there's also a lot of disappointments that came out in 2023. So that's what this last end of the year list is all about. These are the movies that I was anticipating for, or at least I was interested in those movies, but they didn't turn out the way I was expecting. These aren't terrible movies. There are actually some movies that at least I enjoy for what they were, but these are the movies that I definitely wanted more out of. So, let's talk about these disappointing movies and end off 2023 with a good note. So let's start off with my last end of the year list for the year. That is my top 10 most disappointing films of 2023. 10. So I'm going to start off with my number 10 with a comic book movie. The Marvels. Now, the MCU honestly has been a bit of a wreck this year. There's a lot of disappointments within the Phase 5 this year. And with the Marvels, I wasn't expecting anything great. I just wanted it to be just a fun Marvel movie that knows what it is. And it is enjoyable for what it was, but there's a lot of moments in this movie where I'm just like, yeah, I feel like the MCU is going down on the level. I thought the chemistry between Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, and Miss Marvel are great. If it wasn't for Miss Marvel, I wouldn't put this movie lower on my list because Miss Marvel is definitely the best part about this movie. But the story is basically something we've seen many times before. The villain is absolutely terrible. One of the worst MCU villains that I've ever seen. And there are some very dumb decisions that are made in this movie. Like Captain Marvel fixes the planet with fixing the sun. Yeah, that is dumb. I know, I just find that really dumb. That could have just burned the whole planet down. But yeah, the Marvels, it's exactly what the MCU is going for right now, and that's what I call a disappointment. 9. Now into my number 9, another comic book movie. Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Now, I'm one of those people that loved the first Shazam movie. I thought that movie was a lot of fun, and the point of the sequel is it's supposed to up the stakes than the first movie, but unfortunately Shazam! Fury of the Gods just felt like a bland sequel to the first movie. It is fun for what it was. I think Zachary Levi is still really good in the role. The villains are actually pretty enjoyable to watch, like Halle Berry and Lucy Liu. I really do like Rachel Zegler once again. But the story is just very bland and very colluded. And what's really disappointing about this movie is that the film struggles with the balances between the adult superheroes and the kid superheroes. Like, most of the film shows more of the adult superheroes than the kid superheroes, which I was just like, yeah. I forgot there were actually kids in adult bodies. The film's supposed to have that balance, but the film just doesn't have time to explore all that. Especially with Zachary Levi, like, acting different than the actor who played Billy Batson in the movie. Which does have the same issues from the first movie, and this movie kind of developed that issue even more. But just the plot, it's very convoluted. It's something we've seen many times before, and we got one of the most pointless cameos that I've ever seen in a movie. Yeah, Wonder Woman. Very random cameo. Yeah, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Not a terrible movie, but just pretty bland. Now, like I said in my top 10 worst movies of 2023, this is a pretty shit year for Jason Statham. We have The Meg 2, we have Expendables, and we got a disappointing one called Operation Fortune. I love Guy Ritchie. I think he's a great director, and every time there's a Guy Ritchie film, I'm interested in. So, of course, being disappointed in this film was a complete understatement. I thought this movie is just a very generic action film that we've seen many times before, and the thing about this movie is that the characters are just very forgettable. Jason Statham is the best part about this movie, but even his character was just pretty bland and unmemorable. I was looking through my playlist of my 2023 movies, and I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, man, I forgot this movie even came out. We even forgot this movie was coming out, because the trailer came out like 2 years ago, and we forgot the movie just came out. It just came out randomly. And this movie does show that it is pretty forgettable, because this movie is basically a generic heist film that we've seen many times before. And with Guy Ritchie, that's pretty much a disappointment. 7. Now, I understand some people liking this movie. To me, I was expecting a little more from this movie. The Equalizer 3. I loved the first Equalizer movie. The second one was enjoyable enough, but it has a lot of issues. So with the trailers for this movie, I was actually pretty excited. The trailers look really freaking good. Denzel Washington putting on the shoes once again. And for a final chapter in this trilogy, there's no stakes. There's no feeling that this movie is a conclusion to this trilogy. And what's even more about this movie is that it is very, very slow to get to the main plot of the movie. I can understand this movie's trying to do something completely different. Exploring Denzel Washington's character a little bit more, exploring his hometown. But in my personal opinion, I feel like the film explores way too much of it in my personal opinion. If you like this movie, that is totally fine. Like any of these movies that you like on this list, that is fine. But like I said, none of these movies are terrible. Equalizer 3 has some pretty good action scenes, especially from the beginning and the last act. But just through the middle of the film, it honestly did kind of bore me just a little bit because of how slow this film is until the main plot comes along. Now, this movie is also very, very mixed. Some people like this movie, some people hate this movie, but mostly the fans like this movie. And this is coming from the guy that isn't the hugest fan of the video game. Of course, the first game is very iconic. But yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's, I was expecting a lot more from this movie. Especially like the games. The first game especially is really terrifying. Probably one of the most terrifying games out there. And somehow this movie goes for a PG-13 rating and didn't make it scary. Like, there's not a single bit that I was frightened. I don't know what it is about this movie that I was just like, it doesn't feel like the games whatsoever. Yes, the animatronics looks really, really cool, but most of this movie is focused on Josh Hutcherson's backstory, and it's trying to be all connected to the Freddy Fazbear's era. And honestly, I didn't really care too much about it. Even the family custody type story, I didn't care for it. I just want to see the animatronics just killing people and doing all that shit. I know, it's a movie that's supposed to have a story, but even the story I just didn't really care for. Yeah, when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, honestly, it was a bit of a letdown, and honestly, I walked out of it going, yeah, I'm gonna completely forget about this movie, honestly. Alright, we're in the top 5. These are the movies that disappointed me the most in 2023. Not awful movies, but just disappointed me. And Taika Waititi, I feel like he needs to get his act together because Next Goal Wins is the exact same movie as Full Love and Thunder. A little bit better, but still having the same issue, which is that he thinks comedy is why we love these movies. So he makes his movies as goofy as possible. With other movies like Hunt for the Wilderpeople, Boy, Thor Ragnarok, even What We Do in the Shadows, they have their funny moments. It's still a comedy, but it also has some great drama and intensity. I feel like Taika Waititi kind of lost it with these two films, thinking, oh, let's just make it as goofy as possible. And whenever there's drama things that happen, he just cuts it off with a joke at the end. And it just ruins the whole dramedy in that moment. Next Goal Wins has some enjoyable moments. It's a simple underdog story. Michael Fassbender was great in the film. But the problem is, he suffers from an issue of mixing comedy and drama this time around, making this movie just way too goofy than it is. So yeah, Taika Waititi, I still have respect for the guy. I still love him. He's so likable, but his movies need to be better. Now, this is one of the most disappointing animated films of the year because, honestly, this is meant to be the movie that celebrates Disney's 100th anniversary. Like I said in my last video, my most surprising, The Little Mermaid is the movie that I feel like it should be the movie that Disney celebrates 100th anniversary to. Surprisingly, not this movie, Wish. I was very let down by this movie. Especially when people are thinking, oh, we don't have original Disney films anymore. All we get is these live action films, and when Disney buys another studio, they ruin these franchises. So I was watching the trailer for Wish, I'm like, this looks like Disney. The trailers really impressed me, the animation impresses me, and the voice cast, Ariana DeBose and Chris Pine, they impressed me. So I was excited for this film, and walking out of this film, I'm like, the film does pay a pretty good tribute to Disney in general at the end, but the entire movie itself is really bland. The animation is still great. Chris Pine, Ariana DeBose, they are great in the film. Some of the songs are enjoyable, especially this Wish. But unfortunately, the story is just very convoluted. It is something that we've seen many times before. Even the side characters don't get a lot of screen time and a lot of exploration. They are just one of the most forgettable side characters that I've ever seen in a Disney movie. But just the whole story, it's something we've seen many times before. It's like Disney's writing notes, like going, okay, we need a Disney princess, we need a kingdom, we need this type of plot. You can really tell that this movie does feel like it's written by AI, and that really sucked. Now, these are the two movies that are supposed to have a director's cut on the table. With the theatrical cuts, I was let down by it. One of them is Napoleon. I love Ridley Scott. Great director. He has made some hits, and he's made some misses. And Napoleon, unfortunately, was one of his misses. Absolutely, the action is the best part about this movie. The battle scenes, the war scenes, they are fantastic. Joaquin Phoenix, not his best role, but he was good for what he's given. And Vanessa Kirby, of course, being the best part about this movie. But yeah, unfortunately, you can really tell watching this film, there are a lot of scenes that are missing. There are a lot of scenes that could have been much more explored and much more executed. You can tell there's so many stories to tell with Napoleon's story, and the 4-hour director's cut is basically going to fix that, hopefully. Because this movie does feel cut and all over the place, and you can really tell that there are a lot of elements in the film that are quite missing. So yeah, Napoleon, the theatrical cut, did not really enjoy it all that much. So another movie that needs a director's cut, absolutely, because I was pumped for this movie. I love Zack Snyder. One of my favorite directors. I really do. I love this guy. But Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, I was honestly watching going, yeah, it's okay. But you can really tell that the extended cut, the director's cut, is going to be completely better. When I heard that Zack Snyder is making his own space opera film because it's meant to be a Star Wars film, but Lucasfilm rejected it, so Netflix decided, let's make it its own thing. I was pumped for this movie. The trailers really do impress me. I love the cast in the movie. But yeah, with the theatrical cut, the PG-13 cut, it honestly just felt bland and forgettable as hell, with the side characters being very forgettable. The main lead is definitely the best part about this movie. The action, way too much slow motion. If you do not like Zack Snyder's slow motion, you won't like this film. To me, I personally like the action scenes in this movie, but you can really tell that this movie really overlays the slow motion. And apparently that Zack Snyder said that the director's cut is going to be a completely different movie than this movie. Then what is the point of releasing this movie? To tell which version of it is better? That's all I can think about. Yeah, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire is pretty generic. I'm very nervous for Part 2 coming out next year, but it still has some enjoyable elements nonetheless. But it's not my number one. Let's get into the final pick of the end of the year list. Now, my number one is a movie that disappointed me the most this year. This is a movie that I was honestly really pumped for. I love the director, I love this franchise, I love the main lead, and honestly, after the terrible 4th installment, I'm like, you know what? Let's hope this movie just keeps up the spirit within this franchise. But unfortunately, this movie was pretty much a pretty bland and forgettable conclusion to this series. And that is honestly Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Man, what a letdown this movie is. Especially that I love James Mangold. Great freaking director. Logan, Walk the Line, Ford vs. Ferrari. And since he can end Wolverine well, I'm pretty sure he will end Indiana Jones well, right? No, unfortunately this movie is pretty much just a forgettable Indiana Jones movie, and honestly, it made Kingdom of the Crystal Skull better. I'm just gonna say, the more times I think about it, I'm like, at least Kingdom of the Crystal Skull concluded Indiana Jones better than it was in this film. Harrison Ford is still great in this role. He is still great as Indiana Jones. For his final role as Indiana Jones, he brings it all that he's got. The action is still really good. There's a really good chase scene. I thought some of the action scenes are really well filmed. But with the other characters in the film, like Phoebe Waller-Bridge being a complete asshole in this movie, there are so many unlikable characters. There's so many annoying characters in this film. And the problem is, the story. It doesn't have the magic that the first 3 Indiana Jones movies have. It really tries its hardest, but the Dial of Destiny elements I barely remember, like the Crystal Skull from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and just the way they ended Indiana Jones' story in this movie is a complete mess. This movie has 2 different endings, and it just felt very, very forced. What a disappointment that James Mangold does with this movie. Like, every director has to have its worst film in their career, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, of course, felt like James Mangold's letdown in his career. But hopefully he picks back up, because I love James Mangold as a director, but Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, what a disappointment. I was excited for this film. This film was basically developed for years, and what we got right now, yep. This movie unfortunately lets me down. So Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, you're my disappointment of 2023. But man, guys, We've made it. 2023. Tomorrow is New Year's Day. Tomorrow is 2024. We have gone through a pretty interesting year. There's a lot of shit things that happens this year as well with the riot strike and all that stuff, but we pulled it through. What a year 2023 has been. Let's hope 2024 is a killer year for movies. I just want to say thank you guys so much for going through with me this year. So guys, with the last question of 2023, what are your top 10 most disappointing movies of 2023? And also, what movies you're anticipating for next year? Let me know down in the comments below. Have a very good New Year's Eve, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys follow me on social media links down below. Keep contact with me, and make sure you guys subscribe to my channel. Notified for my latest movie reviews and other movie-related content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day.